All right, and we're live. We're just going to wait for a couple of folks to show up, and then we will get rolling. All right, just putting something up here in the chat. Just one moment. All right, hello, folks who are there. If you want to say hi in the chat, I'll respond to you. And one moment. All right. So just a quick overview of what we are doing today, or what we're talking about, rather. Today we're going to be talking about the seemingly endless deluge of UAP, which is just a CIA BS rebranding, right, of the UFO phenomenon. Gosh, for what, like almost 80 years now. Hi, Nige Evans. And anyone who wants to say hi, go ahead and say hi. I'm just going to do an overview before I really launch into things. And if you want to say hi in the chat, I'll definitely give you a shout out. And go ahead and put any questions you might have in the chat, and then I will get to them in the second half. Once in a while, I answer questions, like if they're kind of relevant to what I'm talking about, it catches my eyes. But as a general rule, I try and focus on what I want to get through. And then I, get to the questions in the second half. So today we're going to be talking about the seemingly endless stream of UFO or UAP, which I hate to even give that any credit at all. But just in case people aren't savvy to the UFO thing, they are now calling it, instead of unidentified flying object, it's unidentified aerial phenomenon. But Ian, isn't that just the same thing? Yes, it is. The difference is they've spent the past 80-ish years or more discrediting and calling crazy anyone who dares to utter the word UFO and attempts to be taken seriously. They're a crackpot conspiracy theorist, right? Which is just someone who employs basic critical thinking, has an above room temperature IQ, and perhaps has a bit of a mistrust of authority, right? But they've been rebranding it as UAPs because UAPs are going to dovetail into this whole alien invasion agenda, of which I see two potential versions of that could take place. So anyone else who wants a little shout out there, by saying hi in the chat, go ahead and throw up hello in the chat, and I will make sure that I say hi to it. Other than that, I'm just going to wait for just a couple more viewers to pop in, and then we'll get rolling on this, because there's a lot to cover in terms of this, in particular, this UFO UAP thing. I mean, my goodness, I use Bing as like my secondary browser, and I use it for I use it mostly to like track crypto and just other things. And when you pop into it, the like launch screen has a bunch of Bill Gates, Microsoft funded news stories, and I swear to God, every single day there's a new one about UFOs and UAPs. And of course, last week they did the big bill here in America where they want to force the government, because who is a greater steward of the Constitution and the public trust than Chucky Boy Schumer, out of Democrat of New York. I mean, that guy he just has so much integrity and authenticity, right? He's like one of the main people who is writing that bill that is going to supposedly get rid of 80 years of secrecy around UFOs and UAPs for the good of the common person, right? It's definitely not shaping a CIA narrative of some sort. It's because Chuck Schumer suddenly had a dark night of the soul and thought, I need to do something to help the common man. I know that for decades now I've been involved at the absolute highest levels of corruption and graft, but all of a sudden I'm now a champion of the little guy and the truth. And I'm such a big believer in getting information out there and not using the government to censor it all. Pay no attention to the past 3 years, right? I mean, the very fact that Chuck Schumer is like the primary Senate person driving this really should tell anyone but a completely mindless drone, who's probably a giant Biden voter, should tell them that something is awry if Chuck Schumer's like the main person spearheading it in the Senate. So that bill does a lot of things. Like one of the things it does is it's going to reveal all these military records and so forth. But a very interesting thing that I just found out about is one of the things that kind of inspires today's video is that I saw something very different. So far, all the UFO, UAP stuff has been media sensationalism, nonsense. Like there was that thing where the 9-foot-tall aliens or whatever in oh yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. Hi Heather, how you doing? I hope you're doing well. I was hoping to see you in the angel class. Maybe you can get in the next one. I'm going to have one probably in September, which I'll talk about that in a minute because I do want to put that early in the show. But there was a bunch of nonsense media stories about aliens and UFOs and UAPs that were just very sensationalist. Oh, aliens crashed in my backyard or whatever kind of nonsense, right? And then all of a sudden, you know, you start having more serious political figures. And I'm talking about this is in the wake of that really weird UFO flap where we supposedly shot down UFOs in Canada and over you know, over the Great Lakes and all that kind of stuff that was just all over the media and then suddenly disappeared, where you had the combatant commander crawl out of his crypt there in NORAD and go, you know, oh, by the way, I'm in charge of all of this, you know, and the whole Chinese balloons and all that nonsense that was happening in the first part of the year. And then just suddenly it went away. But then it comes back and then it goes away and then it comes back. And all of a sudden it's the hotness. It's like one of the main things they're talking about, along with the actual hotness of summertime and the changing of the global climate. Hopefully that didn't trigger the censor bots. And this all ties into one of the titles I have for this of the report for Iron Mountain, which I'm going to go into that more. But now that I have a few people watching, I'm just going to, and hi, by the way, hi, Shanjack. One of the things I'm going to say is that my life is nothing if not constantly transmuting. I have a Pluto directly conjunct my ascendant, which in astrological terms means that you're constantly changing, constantly evolving. Your very personhood is just constantly being transmutated and changed, and that you have that impact on others you interact with, like people who are close to me. I always warn people when they first get to know me, I'm like, I warn you, if you get to know me, like your life is going to go and just completely change. And that's pretty much true of almost all my very close friends. And certainly any partners I've had have really had that. And so as part of that ongoing theme, and by the way, hi, Stormcrawl, I've been talking a lot about how I'm going to be working as a consultant for a corporation in a project I really believe in. Well, it just wouldn't be Ian's life if there wasn't curveballs galore. And so some very strange event happened, and there was a crisis for like the founding member, and that has basically delayed my involvement with this group for at least a few months. And so I am reopening, and I'm not teasing people. I'm not making it up. This is literally happening. And believe me, this is far more frustrating than it might be to anyone else. But it just is what it is. Everything happens in divine timing. And so I am going to be reopening up my astrological services. And I'm also going to certainly be doing an angelic magic course that I start in either late August or September for anyone interested in that. And also right now, Venus is retrograde. And so retrograde Venus means, have any of you guys had exes suddenly drop in your email box or send you a text or a drunken call at 3 a.m? Well, not so much the drunken call, but I've had both an email from an ex and a text from someone who is like sort of a pseudo ex. And so Venus retrograde means, among other things, that you go over your, you sort of like think about and take a step back and review past partnerships. And also past partners will rear their perhaps ugly or perhaps beautiful head. And you have to go, ooh, would I go back to that? You know, and the answer should probably be no, but sometimes like we split with people and then we come back together in divine timing. And so if you're interested in learning a bit about some of your patterns around romance and you know, both the positives and the negatives, and want some insights around it, I am doing a special Venus retrograde themed astrology readings that are either an hour or 2 hours long, and I'm offering I'm going to be offering 15% off on that. I have to figure out what the numbers mean. And also I do just want to let people know, for a variety of reasons, I'm going to be raising my rates in September, excuse me. And so if you lock in readings with me before September, then you can keep this current rate. So anyways, with the businessy part of things done, let me just say hi to some other people. Hey, Ingrid. Hey, you're live. Love and life from Oslo, Norway. Oh, hey, that's cool. Norway, fantastic. Well, maybe I'll have to come visit you if I ever go to Scandinavia, which I've always wanted to do. I really want to go to, gosh, what's that place? It's not technically Scandinavia because it's not on a peninsula, but oh my God, why can I not think Finland? I want to go to Finland, and they have those like bubble houses that are warmed where it's glass and you can look up and see the northern lights. And as an astrologer, I really, really want to see that. It sounds amazing. So I do plan to go to Scandinavia someday. All right. We've got enough people here now that I'm going to launch into it. So yeah, Chuck Schumer, ever the absolute beacon of democracy and the constitutional republic, and just the greatest steward the Constitution's ever seen, other than perhaps Mitch, married to a CCP spy, McConnell. You know, like those guys are just, they're always there for the regular people. They're always looking out for us. They're never involved in extreme corruption and graft and just the worst elements of Moroccanism. Oh no, they're good guys. And that's why when Chuck Schumer comes forward and is pushing a bill to let out all the secrets about UAPs and UFOs, you can know in your heart of hearts that clearly such a learned and wise and principled individual like Chuck Schumer would never be doing something like cultivating a narrative for the CIA, right? So there has been just an endless deluge of UFO, UAP media reports. Like if you go on the Bing website, the launch page every day for weeks and weeks now has had some new UFO story, whether it's a more serious one about what's going on politically or from the military or something like semi-credible, to all kinds of sensationalist garbage. And it's just so wild that after decades and decades and decades and decades and decades of that being the lunatic fringe, you know, that was their framing, just like anyone who questions JFK, we need a word for that. Anyone who has critical thinking and can put two and two together. I know, says the CIA, let's coin the term, which they did, conspiracy theorists, and then we'll paint them as wackos. That's why they had to shift from UFO to UAP, because they spent 80 years demonizing anyone who talked about UFOs, and now they want to give credibility to UAPs in a very tightly controlled narrative. So one of the things they're doing is not only they're going to release secrets around it or whatever, but they're also going to declare eminent domain, and they're going to, watch this, they're going to reach into these black projects and seize the advanced technologies that are in it, and then they're going to take it from those private military contractors and they're going to give it to private military contractors. I shit you not, this bill says that they're going to take it from the private military contractor special access programs, and then they're going to give it to Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and Boeing and all these people to develop it. The only one that's sort of outside the main military industrial complex that did catch my eye was SpaceX, right? Elon Musk. So then this looks again like the Luciferians are once again duping the Molochians, and that they're getting them to start something I know they want to do. And I've mentioned this in many prior shows, and you can go back and watch those. I especially recommend the Shadow Wars series, and especially episode 2 on Shadow Wars 2, where I talk about the secret space program a lot more. But one of the things I know they want to do is that they want to eventually release anti-gravity and, air quotes, free energy to the public under very tight controls, because in particular that free energy thing, well, actually they're both very dangerous, because it seems that the anti-gravity piece, it creates what dark journalist Daniel Liz, to his channel is incredible. Please watch. I don't agree with everything he says, of course, but he's fantastic and has done just absolutely impeccable research on UFOs. But he talks about the apotheum effect, of where very often when people have encounters with UFOs and UAPs, and I can vouch for, I know some people who've had firsthand major encounters that there's this feeling of unreality around them. There's various things like electronics won't function, clocks don't work, compasses spin. People like just say the very fabric of reality seems to be getting warped by whatever is causing this anti-gravitic effect. And I'm of the opinion that gravitics technology, electrogravitics, is making use of the electric universe, the fact that the universe is electromagnetic in nature, and all manifestations in the physical world are electromagnetic in nature, and that actually gravity is a function of electromagnetism, and that the unifying forces of the universe is actually electromagnetism, and that when Einstein came along, physics kind of took this turn away from observable, testable phenomenon, which was what physics was constantly until Einstein came along, to suddenly it became this abstract mathematical thing, and like you couldn't really test a lot of the hypotheses well, and they were just like really in convoluted mathematics. I mean, look at like some of the string theory stuff is nonsense. This isn't to say there's not something to elements of quantum mechanics. I think there is. I just think that moving physics and basically turning physics into math, which is what happened starting with Einstein, has moved us away from what would otherwise be a lot of technological breakthroughs. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that's 110% intentional. The same way there was a lot of, in particular, plasma physics that was being worked on in Germany prior to World War II and up through World War II, and then suddenly, poof, disappears. Just like so much stuff disappeared and changed after World War II. History started changing massively. The focus of physics in particular really changed, and a lot of the incredible work that was coming out of Germany from around the turn of the century to around 1945, it just got memory hold. It just got disappeared. Except we do have people like, I think it's Kurt Davis, who was one of the Nazi scientists brought over after the war. He was, I believe it was Kurt Davis. Gosh, I can't remember all the different Nazi guys. There were so many of them. But he was one of the guys who was like the head of mission control at NASA. So if I have the wrong name, my mistake. But he was a plasma physicist in Germany before he came over, and then he was working on solid-fueled rockets, which really doesn't make any sense. And there's all sorts of interesting stuff about how, like in the Vedas, they describe a mercury vortex engine that was at the heart of the Vimanas, the flying machines they had in the Empire of Rama, and the reports about the Die Glocke, or the Nazi bell. And I have a whole interview with Walter Bosley about it, where we talk about it. I talk about it a number of times. Joseph Farrell's done incredible work in this. But at the center of the Die Glocke, this Nazi kind of UFO device that seemed to have anti-gravitic, time effects, and radioactive effects. When they turned this thing on, it supposedly lifted up off the ground. It took just an incredible amount of energy. And what they were doing, where they were doing pulsing, rotating fields of mercury plasma, where they took mercury and they turned it into a plasma, and they had counter-rotating fields inside this bell, and it took this incredible amount of electricity, and the thing lifted up off the ground, and it also spewed out like tons of deadly radiation. And then you see that in the Kecksburg, Pennsylvania event, and a number of other times where people have had real close-ups of very often bell-shaped or acorn-shaped UFOs. People have had like radiation burns and so forth. And so I think it's that same technological group. So it's not a mistake that they changed the direction that physics was moving in after World War II, because again, they wanted to hide all this stuff. And so this bill wants to take from these special access programs that are doubtless in Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and all the big defense contractors, and put it back into the hands of Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and stuff, but publicly. And they want to weaponize it, right? And they want to do that. And so I think this is part of the process of this fake alien invasion, right? Which brings me to the report from Iron Mountain. Now, I don't know how many of you, if any of you, have read the report from Iron Mountain, or at least a summary of it. And, I don't expect anyone to read the whole thing. I haven't read the whole thing, but it's this weird sort of book that came out in, I want to say it was either the late 60s or the early 70s. I believe the early 70s. And in it, they say it's the report from Iron Mountain on the peace or on the necessity and possibility of global peace or something like that. Sounds so noble, right? Peace through slavery is what they really want, right? Because in there, they describe 3 ways that you could achieve a global government. And stop me if any of these sound familiar. One second. They said you're going to need something that's global in nature in order to achieve a one world government. And so the 3 things they came up with was a pandemic, a climate catastrophe, haven't seen anything in the news about that recently, either one of these, or a faked alien invasion. You kind of see how all 3 are being worked at once. You have the WHO with the pandemic treaty. Obviously, we had the whole pandemic nonsense in 2020 to 2023. And then you're seeing now these things where there's actually lower temperatures than a few years ago in Europe, but they're saying they're higher temperatures and having it in red, and they're reporting the highest temperatures ever, but they're comparing asphalt in the baking sun at an airport where there's exhaust fumes and stuff to airborne measurements, right? And then they're conflating the 2 as though it's the same, and they're making it sound like it's the hottest it's ever been. And of course, during the summer, it's hot. And if you go outside and someone says, man, it's 1,000,000 trillion degrees, you might be like, wow, it is really hot and uncomfortable right now. And if you're sitting there ingesting a lot of media, you can fall for that. And so the report from Iron Mountain outlines these 3 different ways that you can create this global government, all of which involve a crisis that then is taken advantage of by a cynical elite. And of course, the Luciferians, when they were running the show for the Moroccan and when they were doing all the heavy intellectual lifting, because as I often say, the Moroccan are morons. They're idiots. They really, really are dumb. And all the stuff that they do that seems super smart, it's the Luciferian handlers and the consigliores, the people who are the administrators, the scientists, right? The intelligence agents, all these people who are very cerebral are telling the people who have power how to expand their power. But now there's a decoupling that's happening, right? As I often talk about, there's this movement to where the Luciferians are preparing a global coup d'etat against the Molochians, right as the Molochians think they're about to seize global power. And so they're doing things like, moving this tech from hidden clandestine programs out into the open. They're beginning to acknowledge UFOs, which are almost certainly 99% of the time or something, that's my estimate, are actually humans driving what I call ultratech. Now, I do believe that there are ETs that have come here, especially in ancient times, or interdimensional beings, whatever they are, right? Or both, right? Because I believe that both extraterrestrials clearly exist in the great wide universe, and some of them are clearly vastly beyond us in technology. I just don't know how often they come here, although I do believe they have been coming here more in the past 40 or 80 years since we invented radar, nuclear explosions, and radio. We've been sending out signals that can be seen on other planets, and so that is signaling to various alien species, not to mention us sending out like whatever that was, that one probe that had a picture of a naked man and naked woman. You see that meme all the time saying aliens telling us don't send any more nudes with directions to your house. It's creepy, right? We literally did that in one of the Voyager space probes. We sent it out there. And so we've been intentionally and unintentionally signaling that we're at a certain stage of technological development, which could draw eyes both friendly and unfriendly. So it is more likely in some ways that there's more of an ET presence now than in the past. That said, I still think that the overwhelming majority of what people are seeing in the sky when it's a legitimate sighting, that isn't, when it's not like a meteor, it's not like, I don't know, whatever kind of delusion on the part of the person or just outright lies. But when people are actually seeing something legitimate, I think the overwhelming majority of the time, it's humans driving anti-gravity vehicles. That I believe we cracked anti-gravity and free energy in the early 60s, actually. And so they're prepping this other attempt at a takeover. And they want to do, a takeover with an alien invasion. And there's two different ways that could be done. There's the classic, they would come down Independence Day and they would use Project Bluebeam, where they would put up a hologram and make it look like there's this vast force and maybe a huge alien mothership. And then in the midst of that, they would have actual vehicles, right? And they would use those 10 or so actual vehicles to come down and go rap, 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 with like lasers and plasma weapon, whatever, blow up some buildings, Independence Day style, and maybe take out some political rivals or whatever. This is the Malachians, what they want to do, right? The Luciferians, I think, are going to do something very different with it. But the Malachians think that they can do an Independence Day style attack, and then everyone will be cowed into giving a global government so we can fight back against the alien menace. So that one's talked about quite a lot. But there is another way that they could achieve the same goal, right? Because the goal is global government. The other way they could do it is they could have aliens come down and say, we are benevolent protector species, and you have reached a critical tipping point, and Al Gore is a prophet, and even though his family owns all these oil companies and he's a real piece of crap, he actually is truly a saint, and you should have listened to the prophet Al Gore. And now we must create, on your behalf, because you're stupid little children, we must create a global government to steward the earth, and you're going to have to deindustrialize except for really rich people who will keep their yachts and jets because the aliens will wave a magic wand to protect them. But you have to give up your government rights because the hippie environmentalist aliens are here, and maybe if anyone resists us, we might zap them a little bit because they're very naughty humans who are going to destroy the planet. So they might have this environmental steward version. So it's kind of like, do you want the right-wing version of where it's these aggressive aliens coming down, we got to fight and be all macho and fight back? Or do you, right, and trick people that way, right? We got to protect that planet against these goddamn aliens. You ain't from around these parts, are you? Right? Or the left-wing version of, oh, love and light, my fellow beings, we've come down to protect your planet, but if you resist us, we'll blow you the fuck up, and you just need to create this global government, and we'll be running it, but please don't look at the humans behind the curtain, right? So it's pretty clear to me that they're prepping all three narratives, and the reason they're doing it is because underneath everything else is this ongoing financial collapse. It's hidden. They're trying to control it, but the financial system is about to be reset. Not necessarily a great reset. That's the Malachians' wet dream of evil forever, being in pods with a chip in your brain, eating the bugs and being so happy. And if you aren't happy, we'll kill you to reduce the carbon, right? There's that whole Malachian version, but there is going to be a reset any way you slice it. Like, no matter what happens, like, the system is built upon debt and it's just too far gone. And then you have next month, the BRICS are going to be releasing this gold-backed currency. Although, interestingly enough, India pulled out of that at the last second, which is very odd. But if you consider that the main driver of this new BRICS-based currency backed by gold is certainly China, it makes sense that India, a local regional rival, would be against that and wouldn't want to go along with that. So there's this huge economic thing that's going on in the background. And also, people are starting to put two and two together around the pandemic and starting to realize, golly gee willikers, it sure looks like that was an attempted genocide with sterilization and turbo cancer because it's weakening the immune system. And by the way, I have some good news for any of my viewers who were forced by their job or whatever to do this. I'm not a doctor. Just some things I've heard help. I can put it like that. Is let me see if I have it handy. Nattokinase helps break down the spikes. I mean, you don't have to get this brand, but nattokinase helps break down the spikes. And the spikes are the main thing that does the damage. And then this one I've heard from a very intelligent, hyper genius person. I haven't verified it yet, but apparently if you do 3 sets of deep fasts, water fasts, but you have to keep your electrolytes up like magnesium and potassium and sodium, right? Because you can't lose neural function if you're fasting too long. But if you do these deep extended fasts and you do 3 of them, you do fast, and then you do some recovery food, and then you do fast, and you do some recovery food, and you do a third fast. The autophagia part of fasting can eat those cells that have been altered by the mRNA. And so this is, just as the angel said, the angels told me months ago that more and more stuff would come out on how to fight it. But the point is, there's an economic collapse that's underway. It's going to happen, probably going to happen this fall. Almost certainly is when like the big collapse will happen. And there's this BRICS gold-backed currency thing, which is a huge torpedo into the Moroccan control system, which is built around the petrodollar. The petroleum-producing countries are ready to cut the dollar loose, which is also the death of the petrodollar, and they want to switch to this gold-backed currency and sell oil for gold, as Russia is already doing. And people are starting to realize, golly, it sure looks like there was an attempt to kill a lot of people, and maybe your family member has been killed by the you-know-what. And so, like, and then there's like going to be famine that's happening. I mean, these monsters using the nitrogen laws, again, using that Trojan horse of, I'm an environmentalist, okay? I'm an environmentalist, but I'm an old school environmentalist. I believe in protecting species and habitat, species most of all, because once they're gone, unless we use genetic engineering, which I think would be a noble use of genetic engineering to, for example, bring back the white rhino by using black rhinos and then white rhino DNA and put it into the ovum of black rhino. But once species are gone, without genetic engineering or some kind of crazy tech, they're gone. That's very serious, and it's something that's horrible and that we're definitely doing. And we're definitely doing habitat loss, right? And when I was a kid, it was all save the whales, save the bald eagle, save the rainforest. You notice those are never talked about anymore? Maybe the last one as a scare tactic, right? Or maybe all of these is a scare tactic, but then always magically it loops back around to CO2 and absolutely nothing else. And gosh, the only thing we can do is to create carbon credits and centralized, highly centralized stuff, and that you guys need to deindustrialize. And we'll just go ahead and fly in our jets to COP26 in Scotland, and we'll just fly in our jets to Davos, and Greta Thunberg will just be on a yacht, right? And John Kerry will just happen to have beachfront property, and so will Bill Gates, and so will Obama, you know. But we swear, the oceans are going to be, 10 feet higher in a few years. Or Al Gore saying, oh, the snow caps will be free of ice by 2013. Or in the 70s, they said, look out for the big chill, blah, blah, blah. No. Most of the climate change stuff we're seeing is one of two things. It's the changing in the sun, or it's the weather weapons. Straight up. That's what's happening. That's what they're using to create this climate change hysteria. But what is also simultaneously happening, and it's been completely forgotten, is there's horrible pollution, like the microplastics in the ocean. There's other pollution from various different chemicals going into the rivers and streams and the air and the soil and all the rest, glyphosate, for example, right? There's species loss and there's habitat loss, but we never talk about those anymore. But we should. That's the real environmental problem. All this bullshit about CO2, it's a shell game. It's just a way of them taking over. Report from Iron Mountain, like I mentioned a while ago. So, I sort of lost my thread there, but they are clearly prepping all these narratives because people are putting 2 and 2 together about the pandemic, and people are getting big mad, as well they should, with a horrible genocide that's still unfolding, by the way, especially with the turbo cancers. And the economy is about to collapse, and they need coverage for that. Some people are like, oh, it's because of Trump. Well, I mean, Trump's important because he's a critical figure among the Luciferians, and he is important. But there's a bunch of people that worship Trump as though he's the second coming of Jesus, and it's like, oh my goodness, that is some misplaced faith, you all. That guy is not in alignment with the Most High. Will he perhaps do some good work, get rid of pedophilia? Yeah, Luciferians are anti-pedophilia, and I support that all the way. Do I like Trump better than Biden? Well, yeah. But I also like the flu better than the Black Plague. So, they're both pretty uncomfortable. One kills you dead, right? So just because someone is better than the absolute lowest of the low is not a ringing endorsement in my mind. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't vote for Trump or support him if you like him. He's certainly better than the alternative. The alternative is Biden. But people act like everything pivots around Trump, which is just absolutely absurd. what everything pivots around is this multidimensional spiritual struggle, of which Trump is an important figurehead in the Luciferian faction. And the Luciferians are fighting the Moroccan. So in that sense, it's kind of true. But the Moroccan are desperate to have cover for their crimes right now. And the Luciferians are setting them up, prepping people for, we're going to have a takeover, and then we're totally justified in our Nuremberg 2.0 kangaroo court to wipe out the Moroccans. And I basically am just completely fine with that, because we need to get rid of these people. We need to get rid of these pedophiles. Pedophilia has to be wiped from the earth, because that's how Moloch touches and manipulates our world. So I'm 100% on board with that. But what I'm telling you is that there aren't really white hats. Sure, there's some, okay? I know some of them. They do exist. That's not who is running things. That whole 17th letter of the alphabet thing, right? Right? The first letter in the word queen, right? I'm trying to be careful because of like the auto censorship stuff. I've probably already triggered the shit out of it anyway, but might as well be a little bit careful. There's an element of truth to that. But they ain't white hats, bro. They're gray hats. They're gray hats. Yes, they're going to turn the tables on the pedophiles and all that kind of stuff. And it also makes a lot more sense, right? Because would white hats, true white hats, those who are in line with the Most High, really allow them to roll out the genocide? No. Would they allow them to continue with the pedophilia? You know, even though it's like building more evidence. You know how they always say in that movement, oh, they've got to build a compelling narrative because the psychological fallout is too hard, blah, blah. That's actually true. It's just that it's the Luciferians doing it. They're not good guys. They're just the lesser evil. And so there is this element to where Trump matters, but it not everything, even though the US is absolutely pivotal to what's happening, it's not the prize. The prize is the whole planet. The US plays a very important role in that. And the US has been Luciferian since the beginning, right? Like if you read the Bill of Rights, it's the most Luciferian thing that's probably ever been written in public. It's like very much about meritocracy. It's very libertarian. It's got like property rights. It's it's I guess I can't say it's anti-slavery because they had slavery back then. There was still that stronghold of Molochianism in the form of slavery and pedophilia are kind of like the two biggest things that are really Molochian in nature. And so there was, even at the genesis of the United States, there was still a Molochian element. And then when you have people like, is it not Andrew Jackson? What's the name of that first Treasury Secretary guy? I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But the first Treasury Secretary guy was the one who wanted to roll in the British Pilgrim Society Molochian system and bring it into the United States. So that reminds me of something I want to talk about. I've recently found this channel called American Intelligence Media, and I don't agree with all of their conclusions, but these guys are frickin' fire with their ancient history research. And they've really pinpointed a group they call the Rodenites. I think they run a little wild with that, and I wasn't able to verify one of their core claims, which is that Rodenites are mentioned in the Doomsday Book. That's that tax survey that England had back around, 12 or 1300, something like that. They claim that Rodenites are explicitly mentioned in there. But what I wanted to say is that group, the American Intelligence Media, I like those guys' research. It's great. They both have kind of like a cold vibe to me. I think they're just seething with anger and hatred towards the Molochians. And like, believe me, I get it. But anytime someone has that low burn hatred, like I feel like they're going to make mistakes and they're going to end up doing that chaotic duality thing of you're either with us or you're against us. It's good, it's evil, it's black and white. They don't have that nuance of, like that Luciferian dimension, this kind of stepping stone between the pitch black of Molochianism to the false light of Luciferianism before eventually you get to the true light of the Most High, right? And just that process that humanity on both an individual level and that we're going through together as a species as we leave the Kali Yuga and move into the Dwarpa Yuga or Bronze Age, where collectively as a species, we're elevating out of this Molochian bullshit and into the new bullshit of the Luciferians. Although, again, it's just way, way, way better. And so they talk about the Rodenites a lot. And what I just want to point out is they're convinced that, they're like, oh, it's the Jews, blah, 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 blah. And that like the Rodenites, it is true that the Rodenites pretended to be Jewish, but the thing is they were Babylonian in character. And all roads eventually lead to Babylon. I talk a lot about with the Venetian black nobility that, they were in Venice, and before that they were Roman senatorial families, and before that they lived in Tyre and Carthage where they openly worshiped Moloch. But those families, those powerful families, they go back further. They go back to Babylon and even Acadia. But Babylon is the key, because Babylon is when dark sorcery kind of reached, not at zenith, but it's when it came to power on this planet in a big, big way. Moloch had already come into the world. The world was already dropping in consciousness. But when Moloch really rose to ultimate power was in Babylon. And so some of the stuff that people say, oh, it's this, it's that, or the other thing, it kind of doesn't matter. At the end of the day, these people are Molochian. These people are Babylonian. And that is the emanation of the true darkness on this planet. And so I just want to remind people of something I said last time, which is that a lot of times in the truth movement, we can get really caught up in letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, by which I mean, we have all these purity tests for one another. We all want to get to the bottom of things. And, we've come across the idea of controlled opposition, which is definitely a thing, agent provocateurs, that kind of thing. But we start getting so divisive, and one of the things that people are so divided on right now, and I even at this point have sort of tapped out, I got so much hate on Facebook that I just don't even want to talk about it anymore. But whether Sound of Freedom is a psyops or not, right? And the thing is, it can be a nested psyops, which I mean, it can be both a Molochian thing where the Luciferians have tricked the Molochians into thinking, if you allow Sound of Freedom out there, right, which was owned by Disney, and how does that happen? They could have endlessly delayed the release of that with lawyers forever. It doesn't make any sense. So the Molochians, at a minimum, had to have buy-in at some point in order for this to be released. They must have, or else it would have never come out. And, I don't buy that it's just a pure Molochian psyops in order to bring out chipping of children, right? Especially for right-wingers would be frightened about trafficking and therefore would chip their children. That's the way this theory goes. I actually think that probably what's going on here is that, again, it's the Luciferians duping the really stupid Molochians by selling them on this holy grail of chipping everyone and putting them in pods and total control. And you can just zap people and torture them from afar. And you can just turn Earth into hell itself, which really gets the Molochians tiny little shriveled dicks hard, right? They love that shit. They love domination and control. And so it's easy to dupe them if you can sell them on greater domination and control. Or, it could be that this somehow snuck past the censors, got through Hollywood, all this stuff, and it's most high affiliated people. I do think that some of the people involved believe that they're in alignment with the Most High, but they have a bit of hatred in their hearts. A good example being, I really like him, Mel Gibson. I really like Mel Gibson. I do think he's trying to do the best, but he has hatred in his heart. He absolutely does. And I think he, could be duped. It's easy to be duped. But the point is, it kind of doesn't matter, because whether it's the Molochians somehow being too clever by half and thinking that if we release this movie about trafficking and bring up trafficking in the mental consciousness, we can then sheepdog people into getting their children chipped. Well, they might have been too clever by half in that once people go, wait a minute, you guys said that was fake for a decade straight and that it was a right-wing conspiracy theory. And now you're saying it's real and that is real, right? And maybe, the Molochians are giving credibility by censoring it on Google and having stars come out, but they're allowing it out there anyway, right? It doesn't matter whether it's an unintentional blunder or whether it's like a Luciferian nested psyops where they're duping the Molochians into getting trafficking more into people's consciousness. So that way, when they do drop the hammer on the Molochians, it ties into that whole Nuremberg trials that will be around the pandemic and central banking and pedophilia. I think will be the big three that they'll have in that Nuremberg 2.0. and that they need to lay the groundwork for that in order to successfully do their coup d'etat. And again, they have to trick an opponent who is like a guy who has his house rigged to light on fire and burn down at the press of a button. And you go into his house with armed gunmen and say, okay, you're being arrested and we're taking your house from you. The guy would go, oh, well, I'm fine to beep, burn the house down around me rather than giving you guys control. That's the Moroccan mindset. It's total submission or total annihilation. And if they can't have control, they would just blow everything up. They would burn everything to the ground. And the Luciferians don't want to rule over a cinder husk. They don't want to rule over a Mad Max society that's all splintered. They want to rule over a technologically sophisticated global civilization. And so therefore they have to very carefully blow up and take over a system that was put in place over the past 6,000 years by the Molochians and replace it with their own system. And that's where things like last week I talked about XRP and XOM, the new financial system. I actually did an interview on parallel systems that'll be coming out here pretty soon where we talk about crypto in super depth and like who's Satoshi Nakamoto. And we go really, really deep on that. And so check out Parallel Systems. It's a great channel anywhere, especially if you're into finance. But, you know, that comes into play, this release of anti-gravity and free energy, that comes into play in the Luciferian civilization, because what Lucifer wants more than anything for humanity is not just to have a highly technologically advanced society here on Earth. He wants us to get out there and start colonizing the galaxy and get off the Earth, so that way he doesn't have to deal with this phenomenon we have on Earth, which I don't know if it extends to other planets, of this cyclical yugas. He wants to get us off the planet, so that way maybe we're not in that cycle, and then he can have eternal control the same way Moloch wants to have eternal control right now through like the Great Reset and chipping everyone and putting everyone in pods. The one with Moloch's definitely going to fail. The one with Lucifer, that might work, getting off the planet. I don't know. I just know that that's one of his like major goals. And so with that in mind, let's turn to Q&A. All right, let's see what we got here. So Nige Evans, I said this earlier, but I'll say it again. Hey, Nige, good to see you. He said, hi, Ian. Heather R, hey, Ian, thoughts on the pole ship? Yeah, so, gosh, this one's scary to me, man. I talked about it on the tinfoil hat. It seems, I mean, if you can believe any science anymore, and I think that's one of the great dangers of our time is, I don't know what's worse, this authoritarian scientism bullshit, or the thought that we might collectively reject science and go backwards because of the degree to which we've been betrayed by the scientific elite, right? But let's for a moment give the scientists who are talking about this phenomenon the benefit of the doubt and assume, just as a mental thought experiment, that indeed what they're telling us is the truth. And supposedly the electromagnetic fields of the Earth are getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and the poles are moving very, very quickly. It's still like only a mile a year or something, but that's actually really fast, and it's apparently speeding up. And both of these supposedly presaged pole shifts, again, depends on how much you trust authorities and science and whether this has been hijacked true as well. But supposedly, this presages a pole shift, and we've had many in the past. Now, it's interesting because I had Peter Champu on a while back, and we talked about how someone he follows says we're about to move out of this this area where an evil star went supernova that's basically haunted with lower astral spirits, which just so happens to coincide with the Kali Yugas moving through this electromagnetic field of this, where this evil star went supernova, and it's sort of a haunted area of the galaxy that our solar system's moving through currently. Again, it's so hard to talk about anything if you believe in a flat Earth, because you just have to reject incredible amounts of stuff, and you're really shooting yourself in the foot if you believe that theory, and you're missing the boat on a whole bunch of stuff. But the solar system rotates around the outer galactic spiral. And when we move through a certain section of it, it's the Kali Yuga. And apparently one explanation for that is this evil star went supernova a long time ago. Now, it's curious to me that we're supposedly about to move out of that and into this different part of the plasma undulation of the plasma field that comes out of the center of our galaxy, what some astrologers call the galactic central sun, which is probably like all the suns that are getting pulled into that central black hole. I mean, even if that exists, I'm somewhat dubious about black holes at this point. But it's curious to me that we might have our electromagnetic field fall. We move out of the explosion of that evil star. We get this burst of energy coming from the galactic central sun, and the electromagnetic field is down, and perhaps we could even have a micronova from our own sun, or some kind of, mega, giga, triple X, not in the sense of porn, but ultra X-class solar flare, the likes of which you've never seen, a Z-class solar flare, and that would bring with it an energy that would completely change human consciousness. Certainly, if we go through a pole shift, that would change human consciousness. What scares me a bit about pole shift is it seems associated with cataclysmic events like the Andes Mountains appearing in a single day. Some people say that the Earth has, like, again, none of this is going to make sense to all the flat earthers if I have any left on following this channel. But imagine that you have an orange, and the orange has a loose skin. And now imagine that the core of that orange stays still and that loose skin slips. Some people say that the mantle and the crust of the Earth will move during a pole shift. If that happens, well, you got to have the grace of the Most High to survive that, because there's no surviving that unless you just get lucky. According to this theory, if that's true, some of our ancestors did indeed survive that, so it is possible to survive that. It's just not something I really want to live through, because that would be a complete reset of civilization. I mean, it would completely annihilate global civilization. So my thoughts on the pole shift are, if true, I really hope that thing I just described of the mantle and crust of the Earth sliding around and mountain ranges getting thrown up and whatnot is not part of it, because if it is, then, well, that's not good, right? But I think that it might be more of that. It's going to change the consciousness on Earth, because our brains are entrained into the Earth's magnetic field, and we respond to changes in the Earth's magnetic field, and it may very well be that that's what causes shifts in consciousness, is a pole shift. Although that would probably demarcate a new cycle all the way around, which we are just about to hit that soon. We're about to hit a completely new cycle. We'll exit the cycle that had Atlantis as the golden age, and we'll enter a new cycle that will have a new golden age. Prior to Atlantis, there was Lemuria. Prior to Lemuria, there was Hyperborea. Prior to Hyperborea, there was something like Polaris or something. I can't remember the fourth one, but these are the different golden ages that have existed on Earth before. And so it could be that happens, and it marks this great reset. And not great reset in the Klaus Schwab sense, but this gigantic reset, right? This ultra reset. I do know karma is being reset. I do know things are really going to change. I do know a lot of people aren't going to make it. I've heard hundreds of millions or billions. The angels have told me, and various deities are not going to be with us by 2030. So a lot of people are going to die from something, but I think that that's easily explained by the you-know-whats and the pokies, and then also like these jackasses doing things like the nitrogen laws in Holland to take all the, Holland, I guess, which is wild because it's a tiny country that a lot of it's underwater or at sea level, but they're apparently the number 2 agricultural producer after the United States, which is crazy. I thought it was Russia, exporter, I mean. But they're doing those nitrogen laws, and they're culling all those cows in Holland and Germany. And so there's also almost certainly going to be starvation at some point. It'll primarily hit, of course, the third world, but it's not going to be like the first world is going to be unscathed by that. And so those two things, plus war, plus economic collapse, easily gets you into the hundreds of millions. I mean, the pokey alone is going to get you into the hundreds of millions, it seems, with the turbo cancers and so forth. So sorry to be grim, but I will say that most people watching this channel have a much, much, much better chance of surviving because of their spiritual vibration, not so much their prepping, although do prep, do get food and water and medicine and means to defend yourself, then gold and silver. And if you want to go beyond that, that's when you can get into things like crypto or other speculative assets. But I don't think that's what's going to happen, that Earth crust displacement theory thing. At least God, I hope not. But I don't think so. I just don't think so. So pole shift, yes. Will it lead to, it could collapse electronics, but would it collapse? Would it cause mass death in and of itself? I actually don't think so, but we'll see what happens. So long answer to that one. Let's see. It's weird how Chuck keeps calling January 6th an erection. Yeah, I know. I think it's because he gets an erection thinking about throwing his political opponents in prison. Like any person who's loyal to a democratic republic would do. That doesn't smack of totalitarianism at all, right? Jailing and censoring your political opponents. What could be a greater indicator of a healthy, functioning democratic republic than putting your political opponents in jail? And by the way, Trump indicted for like the 50 trillionth time, going to be arrested. I don't think it'll stick, but because that guy, nothing ever sticks to him. What are your thoughts on the channel book, Emerald Tablets of Thoth, The Atlantean by Dorio? That's a really interesting question. I've read excerpts, and some of it really resonates with me, and some of it doesn't. I feel that way very often about channel text, and I can tell you as someone who does channel that my own channeling comes through, and it comes through wonky sometimes because it has to filter through my consciousness and my mind to come out of me. And so, like, if I don't have words for things, it doesn't work. When I'm seeing complicated symbols and trying to say it, like, it doesn't always come through. I have channeled stuff that's absolutely come true and is amazing, like that there'd be a banking collapse that would happen in the springtime. The angels told me that happened. I'm just using that as an example that's happened many, many, many other times, mostly around personal events in my life. But there's been lots of times when I've channeled where stuff has come through that's very garbled or even incorrect. And so I don't know. Some of it seems like on the money and worthwhile. I just think that the best thing that anyone can do, and that includes watching this channel, is take what resonates and leave the rest. It doesn't matter if something's like authentic and pristine. It really only matters if it has a practical application in your life, or it gives you a sense of peace and harmony. Anything that increases your sense of peace and harmony, that's a good thing, even if it is false, because you're going to relax and you're going to operate at a higher level. So even if some elements are false, I feel that some elements of it are correct and worthwhile. I have this side. I have the Hermetica. That's what those 4 identical books are. I have the Hermetica on my shelf, and that's derived from the philosophy of people who basically built upon the philosophy of the original Emerald Tablet, which definitely is real. I can tell you that from my own channeling and gnosis, that Thoth the Atlantean was a real person, right? And that Thoth the Atlantean had an emerald tablet. He also had a sapphire tablet. He also had a ruby tablet. And they seem like they're linked somewhat to the planets that are linked to those things. It seems like it's a legacy Atlantean tech that he brought with him to pre-dynastic Egypt, as is shown in the, what is that called? The Edfu building text talk about this. They don't talk about the tablets I just mentioned, although there is apparently discussion of a sapphire tablet in a few ancient texts of Thoth having a sapphire tablet as well. So, hopefully that answered your question there, Stormcrawl. Good to see you. I'm not sure if you've been on before. I feel like I remember that name. Maybe you have. If you have, I apologize. If not, welcome aboard. So Ingrid S. says, hey, you're live. Love and light from Oslo, Norway. I said hi to you earlier, but hi again, Ingrid, if you're still here. Chanjek, my generation precludes the notions of X's, shutters. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but yeah. I'm not sure what you mean by that. That was back when I was talking about how it's Venus retrograde right now, and I had one full blown X and one pseudo, like we had a romantic connection. I don't know, pseudo X, like suddenly popped her head up, and the other one like made a thinly veiled attempt to want to hook back up with me. And that happens all the time. I'll have like partners who don't treat me very well when we're together. And then when we split, they go, oh my God, I lost a real one. What was I thinking? And they want to hook back up again. And I'm like, no, I've suffered enough. Thank you. So yeah, Ingrid said, please do. Yeah. When I travel out of the country, I'll let peeps know, and I'm totally willing to, in a public space, I'm certainly not going to go to your dark and stormy castle or something like that. But, I'll meet with, I'm willing to meet up with, I don't know, people watch my channel or whatever, especially when I'm traveling. That would be fun. And pray for me, people, that this project that I'm working on, just because it'd be such good work and I want to do it so badly, pray that this corporate opportunity that I have to do this really good work, it'll be especially in the third world, that it comes together for me. And if that's the case, then I'm going to be traveling a lot. And then if I'm near your country or whatever, and you want to come to me, or within reason I could come to you, then I'm definitely willing to meet fans, especially when I'm traveling. So Shandex says, all the thermometers are distributed on Boiling Hat Airport runways. Yeah, talking about the whole Trojan horse where they took over the environmental movement with goddamn climate change. Koyos Ronan, great name. Much love, y'all. Much love to you, Koyos. ZSI's Oppenheimer. The Japanese have the nattokinase, kill spike proteins. Yeah, so this is an extract from nattokinase. It comes from natto, which is a specific kind of fermented soybean. I don't really know. If you're into fermented soybeans, then, you can eat it that way, or you can get it in that form. I'm doing it just because we're all being exposed to spikes from shedding to some degree. I unfortunately years ago kissed someone that I found out afterwards had got the jab, and I just intuitively know that the mRNA doesn't transfer from kissing. Sex might be a different story, but I definitely got sick after that. In fact, I got hospitalized a few weeks later because I made out with her, and like a lot. And I did get very sick a few weeks later. Ended up in the ICU in the hospital. That's when I had that whole one of my crazy shamanic initiation moments. So yeah, natto is the fermented soybean, and nattokinase is the active ingredient that you can get extracts like I did. And no, I don't have, although, hey, if there is someone who sells nattokinase and you want to sponsor this channel, I would definitely advertise your product. But I'm not getting any money from anyone. That's just the particular brand that I picked. And I didn't do like some deep dive research. Just I have a friend who's a medical doctor who's against the pokey. And he has been compiling ways to, fix it. And that's one of the things. There's also the Zelenko protocol, which anyone who has gotten the pokey should definitely look into it. Don't lose hope. The number one thing you should do is, just address the physical symptoms. Another time I'm going to do a show where I talk more about the spiritual aspect of that and how to reject the seed of the void or the seed of Moloch. And so that you free yourself from a lot of the spiritual implications, but it doesn't free you from the physical consequences of that choice. Because look, I know that people were forced and had more or less had a gun to their head, but it still was a choice at the end of the day. You notice they didn't hold anyone down and forcibly inject them. I heard reports that maybe some squirrely, random crazy nurses might have injected people while they were under for surgeries, but there was no government level program that had forced injections. Have you ever wondered why that is? It's because taking the mark, right, the mark of the beast, and it's one of the elements of the mark of the beast. The real mark, I think, is chipping, but taking the seed of the void, the seed of Moloch willingly, that was a spiritual test. You can recover from it because you always can redeem yourself, but that is part of it. In fact, I'll just tell you, some people think this is silly, but I'm going to do it anyway. For those of you who did take the pokey, and again, look, I get it. If you had kids, a mortgage, all that stuff, I was very fortunate. I was in a position where I didn't have to make that kind of difficult call. And, praise be to the Most High for that I wasn't put in that difficult position. But here's what you can do. You can just say the following. By my divine sovereign free will, I hereby reject and renounce the seed of the void, the seed of Moloch. I hereby dissolve any karmic or energetic entanglements created by taking the seed of the void. I did so under duress, without full disclosure and knowledge. I hereby permanently revoke any connection to Moloch. By my divine sovereign free will, it is done. The words there, I'm just giving you a template. You can rephrase it how you want. You can throw Jesus in there if you want, or I don't know, some Hindu deity or whatever, you worship, whatever kind of calling the angels, whatever. The main thing is to say that you reject the seed of Moloch and with your divine sovereign free will, you reject the seed of Moloch and you reject the seed of the void. And just, you can phrase it however you want. You just want to put in there by my divine sovereign free will, because it's a free will universe. And the two primary laws of the universe, there's several, but spiritual laws are karma and free will. And so by invoking that sovereignty within you, given to us by the Creator, you can reject anything. You can actually dissolve even demonic pacts. That's a lot. This isn't a demonic pact. Dissolving a demonic pact is a lot trickier, and there's a huge backlash to that. It's worth it, but it's different. But this you can do, and doing that starts to free you from the spiritual and karmic consequences of that decision. Not entirely, but almost completely. The physical issues will remain, however. So just something to keep in mind. Stormcrawl, I just watched Spirit Science video today about the Emerald Tablets and Thoth. Funny synchronicity that you bring that up. That's awesome. Spirit Science is a bit sloppy at times, but there's some great stuff in there. I really like the Graham Hancock actually referencing the Hermetica, talking about like Thoth's message to the future or something like that. There's also a really good one with Randall Carlson and the periodic crises we have, which is why we don't have a record of prior civilizations. So there's been some great stuff on. Oh, excuse me. Both of those are after school, not Spirit Science. Sorry. I get those two confused because they use a similar artwork. Spirit Science has some really good stuff. It also has some stuff I don't like, but right, who agrees with everything from everyone? Like, I doubt anybody watching this channel is like, Ian is exactly right about 100% of everything. And if you do think that, either we're like soul family homies who happen to have almost identical outlook, or you should re-engage your own sovereignty, because I don't want anyone taking this channel as like the final arbiter of truth. That's never been my intention. My intention is to share what's come through me from the angels, gnosis from the angels, gnosis from Thoth, right? From Ganesha and like some of the other like beings I work with, and also from, tons of research I've done, and just so it can help inform and empower you. And I make mistakes. I'm fallible. I'm human. And so just, take what resonates and leave the rest. And you should just use that. You should always use your internal compass as that final arbiter. Don't rely on an external authority ever. I mean, other than the Most High, other than God. But that's very personal anyway, right? And that's all up to our personal interpretation. All right, let's continue. What we got here? Shamjack, there's literally nothing to do or talk about in a snow globe. Exactly. I'm not going to get on my anti-flat earth soapbox here, but yeah, it's so silly to me. It's just so silly to me. And it makes no sense as an astrologer. Like right now, Venus is going from being the evening star to she's going in her underworld journey, and then she's going to pop back up as the morning star. And the motion of the wanderers, right, the planets, right, which are key as an astrologer, it don't make no sense in a flat earth. It creates some crazy convoluted nonsense Mobius strip, and like, why is it Southern Cross in the Southern Hemisphere? And Why do you see the Big Dipper, or Ursa Major in the northern hemisphere? Why does the Milky Way rise right dead center when you're along the equator, and then when you're way up in the north, it's much more off to one side or the other? And why, when you're at the poles, do the stars move in a little circle, but then when you're more towards the equator, like they move whatever? And I mean, there's a million, billion, trillion, zillion, billion reasons why flat Earth, it don't make no sense. But anyways, I'll leave that enough for there. And if you believe in flat Earth, God bless you. Like, I still have love for you. I just think you got that one wrong. It's just like Lakers fans. There's no hope for Lakers fans. No redemption. I'm just kidding. I'm a Blazer fan because I live in Oregon, and Lakers have stomped out my hopes and dreams innumerable times. So that's another one. Storm Call. Thanks. I enjoy your channel. Kind of an odd thing that stuck out to me was the use of the word Kennegan, which is supposed to be the word that exposed reptilians since they couldn't pronounce it. Huh. I haven't read that part, obviously, of the Emerald Tablets. I don't remember that. I didn't realize they talk about reptilians in there. I will tell you, reptilians do exist, at least in my experience. I've met a ton of people who've taken DMT and seen them and so forth. So I don't have any tangible proof, but I've had a lot of gnosis around the reptilians, so I think that they do exist. I think people try to make them the end-all, be-all, and there's a grain of truth to that. Seems like the reptilians have had a big influence on our planet, whether they're interdimensional beings or aliens, kind of doesn't matter. They could even be, the prior intelligent species before us. I don't really know. I think they're alien, though, but that's really fascinating. I didn't know I had it in there. Shanjack says, prayer hands or high five, hammer, water, scales, earth, rocket, a chart going upwards, and an explosion. Not sure what that means, but all right. Someday a future civilization will be watching this live stream and go, let's discover what these symbols mean. Blah, blah, blah. I'm just kidding. Kiki M. Hey, Kiki. Sup, Ian Swarm. Hey, tinfoil hat. Love it. Love it. Gonna download and listen to the whole other thing. Getting into XRP. Finally have something to talk about with the guys at work. Yeah, I mean, I'm basically positive that XRP will be worth way, way, way. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm some guy who talks to angels on the internet. So good luck suing me in court. But anyways, XRP is going to be worth way, way, way more. And if I had any additional money to invest, I would be buying XRP and XOM hand over fist. First, water, food, medicine, means to defend yourself, gold, silver. Once you've taken care of those, then you can go after XRP and XLM for upside. Also, moving out of cities if you're able to. But honestly, the grace of the Most High is what's going to get people through, the coming crises that are, on their way. And there could be something big that happens before this BRICS summit. That would not surprise me at all. In fact, I would be surprised if something big didn't happen. I don't have any prediction as to what that would be, but some kind of distraction, some kind of way of stopping it, maybe. All right, let's see. What is the seed of the void? Sapoki. It's the seed of Moloch, right? The seed that we get from the Creator, think of it in terms of sperm, brings life, right? Or seeds, like planting a seed, a plant brings life. The seed of Moloch brings death and sterilization, the opposite. Archangel Michael called that the Pokey, the seed of the void and the seed of Moloch kind of interchangeably. So that's what the seed of the void is. Jedi Oleolok, LOL, right. Not sure what that's about. JJ, good. What's the significance of sacred geometry? How does it tie into spiritualism? Well, sacred geometry seems to be the principles by which the physical nature of reality comes into play. You can see this with the Fibonacci sequence and the golden spiral and the phi ratio and all that stuff. And it just repeats endlessly in nature. I mean, the Nautilus shell is kind of like the most beautiful example of it, but also the way plants grow with the Fibonacci sequence, things like that. So sacred geometry seems to be the template from which things grow. And if you use sacred geometry in architecture, you can amplify the mental, spiritual energies of humanity. And if you're really interested in it, I would recommend that you listen to the Peter Shampoo interviews that I did. We talk about sacred geometry and the importance of sacred geometry buildings, especially on ley lines. So, and having infernal geometry, if there is such a thing, like having ugly ass buildings, also has an impact on the group mind. All right, let's see here. The word is supposed to dispel their glamour or something. Oh, that Kinnigan or whatever. Guess now you know I'm not a reptilian. Unless I mispronounced it, and you'll be like, there, it's proof. Ian's part of the Illuminati and a reptilian. He doesn't believe in flat Earth. He's got to be a shill. He's a shill for big globe producers. I've seen a reptilian, a professor at my uni. Wow, that's crazy, Harvest Simon. Can you elaborate on that if you want to? By the way, I've reached now the end of the questions. And so if anyone has any additional questions, now's the time to fire them off. You can ask about anything I talked about now or anything I talked about in the channel or within reason, anything you want. But I would love for you to expand upon that. That's wild. I've seen them in like spiritual visions and interacted with one in particular who was actually friendly. They're free will beings. I can say that. Reptilians are free will beings, and all free will beings, whether they're extraterrestrials, right, or interdimensional beings, or what was the other one I was going to say? Or jinn, right? Ugh, don't even like to talk about them. Any being that has free will automatically means that there's going to be evil ones, neutral ones, and good ones in the full spectrum between. So not all reptilians are evil. Now, if things are not biological and don't have free will, which some people, for example, say the gray aliens are automatons of some sort, that they're robotic or that they're biological computers or whatever, biological like robots basically, that they, if they don't have free will, then that spectrum doesn't apply, and they could be purely good or purely evil, right? Like the angels, interestingly enough, do not have free will. That's what's crazy about the fallen angels, is that Lucifer broke ranks and created free will within himself, and then somehow inspired it in other angels. But the angels that are affiliated with the Most High, they're beings made of light, and whereas jinn are made of plasma and humans are made of, earth, air, fire, and water, and spiritus, ether, right? They're made of light, and they have no free will. Angels don't have free will. They have sentience, but they don't have free will. They act in perfect harmony with the Most High, but they don't have free will. But they defend free will. It's one of the number one things they defend. All right. He had a transparent set of lids inside his eyelids. Well, that's wild. And, honestly, I will say that one of the places where they supposedly had a hotspot, the two big places are Rome, Vatican, and the UK is the other place where supposedly they have had their biggest link, and maybe also, I want to say China, maybe, where they've been manipulating people, and probably someplace in the Middle East, but UK and Rome are very often discussed with them. So since you said uni, I assume that you're in the UK, and therefore, it's more likely than other places on Earth. I'm the improbable dreamer. Sorry, misspelled that. Not sure what you mean there, Stormcrawl, but I think we're all improbable dreamers in a lot of ways. Well, folks, is there anyone else that has any questions? If not, I'm going to wrap things up and move on with my day. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I'm just going to give like 3 more minutes to see if anyone else wants to kind of chime in here. And if not, I'm going to close things down and say thank you to everyone who tuned in today. And yeah, Stormcrawl says, I was referencing my last message. Okay. So you were saying the word is supposed to dispel their glamour. I'm the improbable dreamer. Is I'm the Improbable Dreamer? Is that what Kinning, whatever the heck? Let me go back and find that. Is that what Kinningen means? Kinnigan? Gosh, I'm starting to worry I'm a reptilian because I'm struggling to pronounce that. I'm just kidding, but I am struggling to pronounce that. Let's see, Kinnigan or Kinnigan, maybe? I don't know. Maybe it was too long. That's what she said. Yeah, I'm not sure. My message got filtered. Oh, yeah. Well, if there's one thing we can rely on, it's the censor bots to interfere with even basic levels of communication. Sorry to hear that, Stormcrawl. All right. Anyone else with a last thought or question? If not, I'm going to just bid you all many blessings and a good day, and say thanks so much for tuning in. Oh, let's see. I'm on an IG channel that shows old architecture, like World's Fair. Yeah, that is interesting. And I want to do a deep dive on that at some point. I'm not sure what to make of that. Here's what I do know. I'm dubious about that there's these buildings at the World's Fair and that they pre-existed, although I guess there's a building that a friend of mine has seen in Old Town Chicago that still has that Greco-Roman architecture. Of course, mind you, Masons love to make, especially banks or like city halls and stuff, they would use the Greco-Roman sacred geometry architecture. So that's not super strong evidence. Here's what wigs me out about this whole, and I don't believe in, I'll just say, I don't believe in Tartaria as it said, and I certainly don't believe in a global mud flood. Absolutely not. The whole thing about that there's some civilization that had like electromagnetism kind of stuff, like that feels like it might have something to it. But what really trips me up about this whole Tartaria ancient architecture thing is the star fort. When I was a kid, I was absolutely obsessed with ancient history and medieval history, and in particular, like knights and castles. Probably I had a lot of medieval incarnations. I almost certainly did. I just don't happen to recall those. I never heard of a star fort. Never. My dad told me about a 5-sided fort and that was used to make it harder for enemies to attack you, but I never once heard about a star fort. And then I learned about star forts only recently, and they're freaking everywhere. And it also doesn't make sense where they are, like West Coast of the U.S. or southeastern U.S., like near the, like the Old South. Like, why would that matter if people weren't going in there with swords and stuff? Like, why would a star fort help versus cannon fire, right? It doesn't, or an artillery fire, which existed by that point. It doesn't make any sense. So that seems to suggest that perhaps these things, were made before they're claimed to have been made, which is very odd. It's also incredibly weird to me. It's possible I just missed it somehow, but it's incredibly weird to me. Like, how had I just never heard of these things until a few years ago, attached to this World's Fair ancient architecture, in the Midwest. And by the way, I'm not completely, this isn't like flat earth for me. Like, I do have an open mind around the Tartaria thing or whatever. I just like, it smells, there's elements of truth to it, and some of it smells like just intuitively feels like bullshit to me. And I do wonder, like, are the star forts maybe like a Mandela effect thing, right? Because Mandela effect I've definitely experienced many, many times in my life. Actually, if you watch the real life X-Files that I did, where I talked to Cynthia Dreyer now, and about her ex-husband Phil Schneider, who is like the first person, one of the first whistleblowers about deep underground military bases. I don't know, like, I'm not even sure what to think about that, other than I know Cynthia's relating what he said to her, and that Cynthia herself is trustworthy because, I worked with her. But, she pointed out the Mandela effect to stuff that I'd already experienced at that point, a decade before that term was coined. And we both had experiences of it. In particular, like Don Knotts died twice, Jonathan Winters died twice, and then the one that was the super mind blower, which happened while her and I were working together, and we both freaked out talking about it, was Charlton Heston dying twice. And that one was particularly vivid because all the late night comedians in really poor taste both times did this thing where they said, "Oh, I guess we can pry that rifle from his cold dead hand now." And so it could just be that the star forts existed on that different timeline that's now crammed into my timeline. I don't know, but there's something very weird about it. Oh, a bunch of questions popped up all of a sudden. Okay, how do you decide if spirit's on their side? That's a great question, JJ. Here's what I'd say. It's what Yeshua said. You shall know them by their fruits. People often say, oh, Ian, you're a moron, channeling, all that stuff. And I do agree, channeling is very risky. And I actually regret some of the channeling I did. And I've had to like kind of free myself of yuckies. I did a lot of channeling because of my ex who was really into bad stuff. And I channeled some darker spirits. In particular, I did, this is out there in other interviews and stuff I've done. So I'm just not going to hide from this. I'm just going to be transparent about it. I did channel darker spirits a number of times on her behalf. And I channeled in particular Lucifer quite a lot. And that's part of how I have so much information about the Luciferian faction. I can't, ever since I moved my way up the spheres of the angelic hierarchy and I got this mark from the seraphim, I actually can't really hear darker spirits at all anymore, even like anything below neutral. Like I can hear like fairies still, I can interact with the Fey realm, I can interact with nature spirits and elementals and things like that, but I can't interact anymore without great effort, even slightly lower vibrating things. And Lucifer vibrates at lower than neutral, but not super dark the way like the Qaphotic spirits are ultra dark. Right, Moloch, ultra dark. So you shall know them by their fruits. If working with spirits of whatever kind, if it brings you increased harmony, increased peace, like for me, I broke a 27, 29 year, whatever it was, addiction to hardcore pornography that was related to terrible abuse I suffered in my childhood. I just couldn't shake it. I tried. I felt guilty about it, shame, disgusted. I tried all kinds of things to get rid of it. I just couldn't. I was just hyper addicted. The angels helped me work through it. The angels helped me heal my trauma. I'm a much more peaceful, harmonious, giving, gentle, less angry, happier, friendlier, kinder person than I was before I started working with them. And I mean, I just don't buy that this is some kind of super long scam by demonic forces because, again, I actually have direct experience with those forces, and they were always pumping up your ego. Right? Like the angels sometimes tell me things that sounds kind of grand about like a positive role I have to play in the world. And, so they can tell you things like that you have a certain amount of specialness to you, but they're always going to do it in a way that puts the Most High at the center and doesn't build up your ego. And if you find that I'm getting greedier, I'm getting angrier, I'm having a terrible, uncontrollable lust, I'm becoming more gluttonous. I'm becoming more addicted. I'm becoming more full of myself. More people are telling me I'm an asshole. Everyone who knows me is like, wow, Ian, what happened? You've gotten nicer and nicer and nicer and more wonderful over time, right? So you shall know them by their fruits. Be very careful, and I will just say this. There's two classes of beings that I will never interact with, especially channeling. Jinn and extraterrestrials. And the reason is that you're exceedingly unlikely to run into a blue jinn, which are the positive jinn. Your best case scenario is you run into a green jinn, which are young jinn, and they tend to be tricksters and mischievous. But more than likely, if you summon a jinn or try and go where jinn are, you'll run into a red jinn, and they hate humans with every fiber of their being. Extraterrestrials have no skin in the game when it comes to the planet. They have plans for the planet, but they don't have any kind of they don't have any skin in the game. Like the planet could blow up and they'd go, oh, well, we'll move on to the next one. Even the jinn don't want the planet destroyed, right? The jinn the red jinn want to wipe out humans and come back out of the fourth dimensional like prison they're in. They can come into this world to some degree, but as a general rule, it's very difficult for them to come here unless they're summoned or there's certain like gateways they can come through, but there's all sorts of restrictions for them. And they used to live here. And they want to come back, and they hate us because we replaced them. The angels went to war with the jinn, and it took like 10,000 years or something. The jinn are virtually immortal, and the angels finally defeated them because the jinn had become really, really corrupt because they lived so long and they were so insanely like magically and psychically powerful. So they got replaced, that was the first attempt with a plasma-based free will creature. They got replaced. This is according to the Quran. It rings true to me. They got replaced by us. And the story of Iblis is very similar, interestingly enough, to Lucifer. It's not the same being, though. But so anyways, you have to be super careful with the jinn. I would just recommend avoid them at all costs. You're more likely to get good results from demons than jinn. That's how strongly I feel about it. Don't mess with demons either would be my suggestion. But aliens are worse. And the reason is that demons need humans to fulfill their role. And demons are earthbound spirits, right? So they have skin in the game. The Qaphotic spirits, the evil gods, with the exception of Moloch, who's kind of like a weird, ultra-destructive force, all the deities, they need, and spirits, they need humans to some degree, or they have some amount of skin in the game when it comes to this planet. Extraterrestrials do not. So don't mess with ETs. Sure, some of them are good, but I would never roll the dice on that. So how can you tell if spirits are on your side? You shall know them by their fruits, but I would just advise extreme caution, other than working with the angels, and then just watch, because the demons can pretend to be angels. Angels are going to fill you with a lightness. You can feel awed by them, but you should never feel fear or anger. Or if you feel shame, the angels will almost always try and alleviate your sense of shame, because they don't want you to feel shame. They want you to correct your sin, which is the missing of the mark. So angels might chastise you for like, hey, Ian, you need to smoke less weed, or hey, Ian, you've got to stop doing pornography because you're missing the mark, or you can't get upset and yell at your son or whatever. But they don't judge you in a fire and brimstone-y way at all. They try and course correct your life and bring your life into more harmony. So it's something that would be, and maybe I'll do this at some point, it'd be worthy of an entire series, to be honest, talking about all the different classifications of spirits. What I would recommend is don't dabble in that shit as a general rule. There's things you can do to like connect with angels. I mean, if you want to take an angelic magic course from me, that I can guarantee and vouch for. But as a general rule, I would just say to the average listener, be very, very careful with channeling or interacting with spirits at all. Be very, very careful indeed, because there's a real good chance that you can run into a trickster spirit, which can cause you all kinds of problems, or a demon, or even an ET pretending to be a good spirit. So just be very, very careful. Wow, a bunch of stuff here. Okay, so much for living up. I have no, I don't know what that says at all. So if that's bypassing the filter, then I don't know what the hell it's saying. I can't read it anyway. Book recommendation, Beware of Angels. I haven't read that, so that's interesting. I find angels to have been the single best thing that's ever happened in my life. I mean, other than some loving people in my life. That said, yeah, be careful for all the reasons I just said. Star forts are interesting. Totally agree. Fake fronts, World Fair architecture. Yeah, I don't know. There is something weird about that whole World Fair thing. I would really like to talk to an expert. I would love to even have someone who really believes in Tartaria and someone who has researched it enough to debunk it. Have a conversation on my show. That would be awesome. There's something weird going on with the whole World Fairs and these older buildings, though. I don't know what to think of it, though, to be honest. I haven't done a deep dive. It proves a worldwide mathematics. Okay. Tartaria to me is bunk. Not trying to insult anyone, though. Yeah, I tend to agree that there is something. I just don't buy the Tartaria mud flood thing. These ancient buildings, though, that has some kind of legs, and very often they do things like, for instance, I think flat Earth is I think that it's, among other things, it gets people to not look at the possibility of a tube torus shaped Earth where they're hollow Earth, where there could even be entrances at the poles. And I mean, that goes from anywhere from a very honeycombed Earth to one that has full blown entrances at the poles, to even like more crazy that there's like an additional sun inside the Earth, and that there's civilizations inside the Earth and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, to me, flat Earth is in part a distraction from hollow Earth. And likewise, Tartaria might very well be a distraction from either the Mandela effect, causing all these weird buildings to suddenly be in our timeline, or that there's something else like a prior civilization, kind of like Tartaria, but not quite that, and that it's to herd people in a predetermined direction. It has a psyopsy feel to me to it. The pyramids are proof the world is round. It's in the math. I absolutely agree. Yeah, telluric currents related to their situation over special geologic features. That's interesting. Very possible. Yeah, I'll have to talk to Peter Shampoo about that at some point. We're friends now. We do calls and stuff sometimes, so I'm going to have to ask him about that. Starforts harness energy and are in ley lines. Yeah, might be. Look, I'm open to something that my intuition tells me there's something to this. I just don't know what it is, and the Tartaria part of it feels false, which leads me to believe to what I just said about the flat Earth versus hollow Earth type thing, or it's a weather balloon, it's aliens at Roswell, it's a weather balloon, it's aliens, or it's a Nazi spycraft, right? A Nazi anti-gravity tech, and they were flying over White Sands because of our missile, our nuclear program was right by it. Timothy Hogan talking about Vimenas and monatomic gold was enlightening. The Mercury Vortex Quicksilver engine was also very interesting. Yeah, no kidding. Everyone should check that out. Someone said, "Oh snap!" Not sure what you said, "Oh snap" about, but snappeth it beeth. Let's see, Jay. Thanks. I could really use such a filter. Suspect much of my health issues are due to the incessant negative talk and energy siphoning from that realm. We replaced them. Yeah, we replaced jinn according to the Quran. It's one of the most fascinating things in the Quran, and it rings true to me actually that jinn were like, they made angels first, and then the next prototype was creating plasma-based, free-willed beings that lived a phenomenal amount of time and that had incredible magical and psychic abilities. And that then they became very corrupt. And so God eventually decided to wipe them out, much like the Nephilim with the flood. I don't know if they have that in the Quran. I'm not sure, probably. But basically, these were very corrupt, bad beings because they lived so long. Not all of them, but enough of them became corrupt that at first God asked them to willingly leave and was going to like make them another world or something. And they said, "Oh, hell nah." And in particular, Iblis, which is one of the which is like the head evil jinn, the head of the red jinn, basically. And he rebelled against God. He had been up to that point a very pious and very spiritual jinn who was allowed into the celestial realms and could hear God plan with the angels of what would happen next. And he rebelled, very similar to the Lucifer story, but not exactly the same. And that then the angels went to war with the jinn. And the jinn were so powerful, it took like 10,000 years for the angels to eventually defeat the jinn. And then the jinn got cast into some kind of like fourth dimensional prison. So they're sealed away from our world. And a lot of them, the red jinn, hate humans with every fiber of their being. And they want to wipe us out and take back the earth. That's what it says in the Quran. There's a book called, I can't remember. Some kind of book on the jinn. Do I have it over there, perhaps? Gosh, I don't know. I have it in PDF form. I'm not sure if I have it in paperback form, but there's some really good book on the jinn out there. There's definitely something. I mean, I definitely believe in the jinn, and to be honest, I kind of fear them. Yes, I don't know what you don't have. Probably something I said at the time. That's just a list of random characters he could use to replace vowels in unfiltered words. For example, cheese. Oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, no, we were discussing two types of filter just now, the censorship filter and the psychic filter. Oh, very interesting. Sorry I missed that like side conversation, I guess. Sometimes because I'm trying to answer the previous question, people are responding in real time and I don't catch it. So JJ said, been a pleasure. Thanks. Thank you to everybody showing up today. I am going to call it a wrap here. I got stuff to do with the rest of my day, but it's been a true pleasure, everyone. And just a reminder, for people coming in late, I am actually reopening at the very end of August and into September, possibly into October. Right now, I'm just opening up the end of August and through September for astrology readings. The minute that I start that job with the corporation, which is going to involve astrology heavily in it, I'm going to shut down my astrology charts. And I promise you, I'm not teasing this. Literally, this thing getting pushed back has really thrown a wrench in the gears in my life that's very upsetting. And I'm really hopeful that it straightens out because there's such good work to be done and I really want it to work. But right now it's been thrown into kind of a state of limbo because of a personal crisis of the founder, who is a dear friend of mine and someone I love very much. And I really hope things resolve for them soon. So thank you so much, everyone. And I will be offering angelic magic classes in September. I am offering a 15% discount on love-related readings now that we're during this Venus retrograde and exes are popping back into our life, or we're thinking about exes, or we're reviewing our love life and what we've done wrong, what we can do different. And so I'm giving readings based around that, either 1 hour or 2 hours. And so anyone interested in that, you can just go on my website and send me an inquiry, and then I'll give you a code to get a discount, and then you can just book an hour or 2 hour reading. And then I'm continuing to do spiritual guidance, and that I will be continuing to do into the future. And so if you are looking for some guidance in your life and you think that I could help you, I would love to be of assistance. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful day. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.